Hi VivaFam! Today I'm interviewing Anand. As a 12-year-old, he weighed well over 200 pounds. As a teenager, he was close to 300 pounds with a waist size of 50 inches and 50% of his body was fat. He has since lost over 125 pounds and kept it off for 6 years. He is an online and in-person fat loss and strength coach in Mountain View, California, and he's also a power lifter. Talk about 180 turn. I covered so much ground with Anand in this interview that I couldn't fit it all in one video. So this interview is going to be in 3 parts. We're going to talk to Anand about his journey, all of the bad advice he got, how did he get out of that and find the good advice, all of his successes, all of his gotchas, and what he suggests for all of those gotchas. We're going to talk about common scenarios and ask Anand for his advice for them. So for example, if your scenario is that you're just starting out, or maybe your scenario is you have started but you're stuck, or other common scenarios that exist, you're going to hear directly from Anand as to what he suggests. And finally, you're going to get the big picture learnings. These are 20 years worth of learnings that Anand has had synthesized into actionable tips that you can get started on right now. Today's video is a doozy, jam-packed with 20 tips that will get you working smarter towards your fat loss goal. Anand talks about the difference between exercising and training, when to use cardio, what's the difference between keto, intermittent fasting, and all of the diets out there, what is metabolic adaptation and why you should know about it, and much more. If you want to get notified when the next part of this interview drops, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell icon. So I touched upon your background a little bit in the intro, but could you elaborate on it with like more colorful details and like what actually happened?
I was born right here in California, actually, but then my parents moved back to India because that's where they're from. And I grew up there for the most part ever since I was like 3 years old. But I'm back in California. I live here. I've been here for over 7 years. And my story is that growing up in India, I used to be extremely overweight. And, you know, it's a struggle being overweight. You know, everyone knows about it, but I think it's an even bigger struggle back in India because you don't have so many overweight people compared to, let's say, the US, right? So I was like extremely obese growing up. Like even as a teenager, I was weighing well over 250 pounds, something like that, and it wasn't a good time. Just to say it that way, because you know, like compared to other kids, you can't even do the same activities, you can't play the same sports, people like constantly make fun of you. uh, you know, so there's a lot of struggles that went on behind the scenes, but I was eventually able to use those struggles and those um, the negative energy, and I was able to channel it in a way where I was able to transform my body. But in the process of transforming my body, I was able to transform my mind as well.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agreed. Like how that goes hand in hand. You said a lot actually in there. I'm curious, what do you think caused you to be overweight as a kid?
I would say it's a combination of 2 or 3 factors. One is I've always had a big appetite, so even today I have to really watch myself, otherwise I'm gonna get fat like within no time. So, because I can eat a lot. That was one thing. The second thing was back in India and even in the US, you know, especially if you have like Indian or Asian parents, they really force you into focusing on only on your studies, and you need to be good at school and science and math and all that kind of stuff, right? So, growing up, I never played any sort of sports. The school that I went to barely had any sports, you know, except for like some events once a year or something.
Right.
So I was extremely sedentary, and then I used to go to school all day, and then after school I used to go for after school classes. So just sitting all day,
Right.
not really doing anything physically. You know, even though my family wasn't overweight, but they always you know, make you eat a lot of food, and you know, you always have access to good food.
Right.
Back at home, we even had a full-time cook. So, you know, whatever you need, they just keep feeding you. And, yeah, it's hard to say no, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially as a kid when you're getting a lot of good food. You started off trying early, is what I understand. You said at the age of 12, or was that even earlier than that, that you were aware that this is something you wanted to change?
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is I was always aware of this, even when I was like, let's say under 10 years old, right? Because people, like, people let you know, they make fun of you, they make comments, all of that stuff. So I was always very aware of this, and even used to, it really bothered me, but there was not much I could do about it because first of all, I didn't know what to do. But
Mhm.
I recall probably even when I was 10, 11 years old, or maybe even 12, something like that. I remember, I think my parents might have even taken me to like a weight loss clinic or something, or a dietitian,
Mhm.
just to get just to find out what we can do. Because
Right.
back in those days there was no internet, and the information was very limited, right? So we had to rely on these so-called experts. uh, and I'm saying so-called because looking back, their advice was so terrible,
Yeah.
just based on what I know, what works and what doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually I joined a gym when I was 13 years old, because that was the minimum age to join a gym, because they won't let you become a member before that.
Right.
And that was the time that my body started to change for the very first time, and that's when I was hooked to the iron, as they say.
Yeah. What did they tell you actually in the weight loss clinic? I'm curious, like what did you do there?
There were these very restrictive diets, like
Mm.
you can only eat these foods and you can never eat these foods, and basically they ask you to do something that is not sustainable.
Right.
So let's say if you and your family are used to eating certain foods or in a certain way, there's
Mhm.
better ways of manipulating your food intake, or even your energy output, to get long-term results. But they ask you to completely modify your diet, and you can't
Right.
even eat your the same foods that your family eats anymore, which is, especially as a kid, it's a struggle, right? You can't expect a kid to, like, his whole family is eating this food, but then this kid, you have to make a special diet and special foods for him,
Right.
which is not
Yeah.
practical, nor is it sustainable. So, and these were like extremely crash diets, like,
Right.
I remember they even had some blood work done on me, some
Mhm.
blood tests,
Mhm.
and they were like, you shouldn't consume any protein.
Oh
And
wow.
and the fact is, I grew up in a vegetarian household, so it's
Mm.
not like I was getting a lot of protein.
Yeah.
And they were telling me to cut back on like dals and pulses and stuff
Wow.
like that, because they're like, it's too high in protein and you don't want that. So, and then they ask you to eat all these low fat foods,
Right.
and just no, absolutely no practical consideration,
Yeah.
just telling you what you should do instead of teaching you what to do.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, like even with the internet, there are so many weight loss clinics that still exist that, put you on like an 800 or like a 1200 calorie diet. And it sounds very similar. Like it seems like they haven't disappeared.
Yeah, and it's not gonna disappear completely, because people are tempted, I would say,
Yeah,
because they get that fast solution, but they don't think long term,
yeah,
and that's where they mess up, because anyone can starve for a short period of time, but
yeah.
then you gotta ask yourself, is this sustainable? Because the truth is, there has to be a lifestyle change. It's not a diet change or an exercise program change. It's a complete lifestyle, and if that is sustainable for you, then you're not gonna get those results.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah. You have also made a big point, like, related to this about how people want fat loss and not just weight loss. I know a lot of people who are watching this have tried or are considering trying something extreme. So, like, do you want to expound on the difference between the two and like how the kind of diets that you put into, what happens in the short term and then what happens in the long term?
Yeah, sure. Most people focus on weight loss, including myself, right? Like, we weigh ourselves as a measurement of whether we're making progress or not. But that's only part of the picture, without any consideration to body composition. My body started to change when I focused on fat loss versus weight loss.
Mm.
And the main difference is, when you lose weight or you focus only on weight loss, then the weight that you lose can be anything. It can be fat, it can be lean body mass, it can be you lost some water weight, maybe you cut out sodium in your diet, that caused some you to release some water, maybe you got rid of stress. So your weight kind of fluctuates, but when I talk about fat loss, that simply means that you focus on losing the fat, which is what you actually want to lose, while maintaining your muscle mass. And the way you maintain your muscle mass is by focusing on strength training,
Mhm.
making sure you're consuming enough protein in your diet. I think those two things are key, and just focusing on getting stronger in the gym, because that's the only thing that's gonna prevent that muscle loss and also gonna help you build that muscle mass while you lose fat.
And tell me more about your experience with your first trainer and how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was completely bad. I think I definitely had it better than most people
Mhm.
because it was a gym, right? I mean, if I would have gone to some other place that didn't have weights and stuff like that, then it would have been worse. But even those trainers were like, you shouldn't lift heavy,
Oh,
like I remember one time even my other friends who used to work out sometimes, together, the trainer used to tell him to lift heavy and gain muscle, but not me, because he's like, you want to lose fat, so you gotta lift lighter weights and you gotta focus on doing more cardio and stuff like that. So the truth is, the training doesn't really differ, right? Because
right,
everyone has um, the same amount, not the same amount, but everyone wants to build that lean muscle mass, whether you're fat or you're skinny or you're normal weight. So that
right,
shouldn't change. What changes is the diet and how many calories you consume. Things like that should be manipulated, but it shouldn't. Your training fundamentally shouldn't be that different compared
right.
to someone else. Especially once you start focusing on more on doing cardio,
Hmm.
it's not very conducive in the long term, because like I said, it's cardio is definitely a great tool, but you can overdo it, and it's not going to make a huge difference in body composition. Going back to the weight loss versus fat loss thing, cardio can help you lose weight, but it's there's no guarantee that that weight's going to be all fat mass and no muscle mass.
I think you touched upon this a little bit, but then if you wanted to give the order in which you feel people should be paying attention to things.
For training, I would say the basic basis should be strength training,
Hmm.
which is focusing on your compound exercises. So these are gonna be your barbell and dumbbell exercises mainly,
Hmm.
compound multi-joint movements, because they give you the biggest bang for your buck, right? Because they
Right. And
use a
what are
lot
some
of.
examples of it, just in case people don't know what they are?
Sure. Yeah, things like squats, bench press, deadlift, overhead press,
Mhm.
pull-ups, chin-ups, stuff like that don't really require any fancy equipment, but they've been proven time and time again to work. And they also are very efficient, because if you do these exercises consistently, you don't really have to do a lot of other fluff exercises, because they work a lot of muscles at the same time. So you end up saving a lot of time, and
Mhm.
they are also very effective at long term. They're very effective at building muscle, because you can really make progress with that, continuously get stronger.
Right.
You gotta find a program. So no, it's not just about exercises, it's actually about training, right? And what most people do is they only exercise or they get a workout, and
Mhm.
the exercise is like, it's going to give you results in the short term. So you
Right.
might feel tired, you might be sweaty, you might burn some calories, but are you really training? And training is, it doesn't matter how you feel in the moment, but it's going to prepare you for a future. um, it's going to prepare you for the future, whether your goal is to train for strength, so you want to get stronger, right? So your program is going to be designed in a way that's going to make you stronger. So it doesn't matter how you feel in the moment. Like, you might not do a workout that's going to make you puke or something, but
Yeah.
as long as it achieves that goal, that's what you're doing. And it's almost like uh, expenditure versus investing, right? Like,
Right.
you can spend money and you can get the immediate gratification, but if you invest your money, then that's gonna pay off in the long term or later on. So
Right.
it's almost that, it's something like, it's an analogy that I like to make at times.
Yeah. So it's more like looking at a workout versus training is having a long-term program over
Mhm.
multiple workouts and like
Yeah,
tracking how
yeah,
you're doing. Okay.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
because you gotta track if you're making progress or not. And
Right.
uh, that's another tool that they say, what gets measured gets managed.
Yes.
and a lot of people are afraid of looking at the scale and things like that. But sometimes it's a good tool. It's not for everyone. There's definitely some clients I've had that I don't have them look at the scale because they're so obsessed and attached to that number. So we can look at other things, but
Right.
there should be some measurement of progress.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So one was strength training and making sure it's training and not exercises. Are there other things on that list that you would say?
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say, yeah. So for the physical part of things, I would say strength is the main thing. If you need to burn more calories, you can do some sort of cardio.
mhm,
Um, because sometimes strength training might not be enough for you. You might have hit a weight loss plateau or whatever. So you
mhm,
can do some cardio to burn that extra energy.
right,
Because at the end of the day, it's all about the energy balance, right? So if
mhm,
your goal is to lose fat, the very basic thing you need is a caloric deficit,
right,
and it doesn't matter how you achieve it, as long as it's sustainable for you. So there's many ways of achieving a caloric deficit.
mhm,
There's many different diets that can allow you to do that.
mhm,
But any successful diet out there, that they're designed to create that caloric deficit. Whether
right,
they ask you to go low carb, they ask you to go low fat, but
mm,
they're all achieving the same thing at the end of the day. But you gotta find what's gonna allow you to create that deficit.
right. And could you elaborate on that piece? Because I don't think people understand that these diets are just causing you to be in a lower caloric deficit. They think it's a separate thing from a caloric deficit. So yeah, go ahead and explain that part.
Any diet, right? Let's say if I tell you today that you cut out all the carbohydrates from your diet, so you're automatically cutting out an entire macronutrient from your diet.
Right.
So your food intake is most likely gonna go lower, right? So your
Hmm.
energy intake is gonna go lower,
Yeah.
and it's also gonna make food less palatable,
Hmm.
because typically food tastes good when you have like carbs and fats and
Yes.
all that kind of stuff, right? But if you like, if I told you to eat like a low fat diet, like don't eat any fat, it's like eating cardboard or whatever, right? So it's gonna restrict you that way. I don't recommend it. Basically, it help you achieve a caloric deficit, whether you're doing a low fat or low carb. But you gotta find what works for you. But for the most part, I recommend the answer is somewhere in the middle, and definitely need to practice that moderation. People face is that initially they lose a lot of weight because they just started dieting and the body responds pretty well to it. But then inevitably they're gonna hit that plateau,
Right.
and that's when they get discouraged.
Yeah.
So
And did that happen to you after those months?
it did, yeah. But my thing is, even before I hit the plateau, I actually stopped going to the gym. You went from a certain lifestyle to a completely different lifestyle,
Hmm.
and you just end up gaining weight, and if not even more,
Right.
because at that point, especially if you've lost weight, when you lose any significant amount of weight, there's two things that happen, right? One is your metabolic rate is suppressed, and what I mean by metabolic rate is your maintenance calories are
Hmm.
gonna be quite a bit lower. So first of all, when you are a lighter person, you're gonna need fewer calories anyway than a heavier person, right? But even if two people weigh the same amount, but one person has dieted down to that weight, whereas the other person is naturally that weight, the dieted down person is gonna have a slower metabolic rate
Hmm.
simply because of those metabolic adaptations that take place, right?
Right.
And then your hunger levels are going to be super high at the end of your diet
Yeah.
because you've been depriving yourself, and you just can't wait to eat everything, right? So that combination of having a lower or suppressed metabolic rate and also having super high hunger levels, it's just a recipe for massive weight regain.
Right. Right. And then, so after you regained that weight, how long did you regain it and then decide to do something about it again?
I regained it, so I was pretty heavy for almost 2 years.
Hmm.
So like 10th grade and 11th grade, and to be honest, like for a while I even got really complacent about it
Oh.
because I was like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to be lean, maybe I'm
Mm.
just supposed to be fat and it's in my genetics, and I should just accept this and you know focus on other things in my life. But then I snapped out of it. I was like, no, this is not acceptable,
Yeah.
and I need to do something about it. And
What caused you to snap out of it, do you think?
I remember I don't know if the video is still up there on YouTube, but it's called Still Pumping or something like that, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a follow-up to Pumping Iron that Arnold made back in the 70s. And I was just watching that video, and he said something like, when most people want, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember the exact words, but he's like, when most people want to do something, they're like, I want to do this, and maybe I can do this. And he's like, there's no maybe.
Yeah.
He's like, you got to wake up every day and tell yourself, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. There's no excuses. And
Yeah.
then that hit me so hard. And I told myself, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I just went all in, for over a year, I was going to the gym twice a day, every single day,
Yeah.
instead of, and especially at that age, like people like to socialize and go out to eat and whatnot, hang out with friends. And I'm like this guy just going to the gym all day, twice a day.
Yeah,
Like,
that's dedication.
but I actually my I would say, yeah, there is some dedication, but I also enjoy doing it. So I think that was my advantage. So
Right.
you gotta find what you enjoy, right? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I can recommend you to go to the gym because that's proven to work, but not everyone wants to do it.
Right.
But
Right.
for me, it's just ever since I lifted by force weight, I've just been hooked to it, even to this day, fortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty awesome that you enjoyed it from day one. It took me a while to figure out a routine that I actually enjoyed. So for the longest time, I think there's the flow state, right? Like if
Yeah,
it's too challenging, you get scared. If it's not challenging enough, you get bored.
yeah.
And it takes a while to find that middle ground. So it's pretty awesome that you found it day one. I was actually curious, like, when you start making all these changes, like mentally or emotionally, like people have a lot of trouble switching to these new habits. Do you have any struggles where you're just like, oh, I just don't want to do this?
Just seeing that progress, every single week. So I broke down my goal basically. Like most people get overwhelmed because they set big goals, which is great. You should set big goals, but then you also gotta map it out, right? So I was
Right.
like, I need to lose at least 100 pounds. And
Mhm.
if I want to lose 100 pounds in a year, how much do I need to lose per week? So it's roughly 2 pounds a week, right? Like if
Mhm.
it's 52 weeks a year.
Mhm.
And 2 pounds is, it doesn't sound that scary, right?
Yeah.
And just seeing the scale go down every single week was
Mhm.
um so motivating by itself. Every single week it's going down like two
Yeah.
pounds 2 pounds. Like two
Yeah.
pounds doesn't sound like much, but like in a month I'm like 8 pounds down, and in 2 months I'm
Yeah.
16 pounds down. And
Yeah.
then e- even like losing 10 pounds, people are going to notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I have two questions on that. So I love the idea of setting goals and especially breaking it down. And then there are two things that I've noticed happen. Number one, what is a reasonable amount of goal to set when you're trying to lose weight? Because people come to me and they're like, I want to lose like 5 pounds in a week or something.
yeah,
Right. And then the second thing is you mentioned hitting plateaus. And
yeah,
then people just feel like things are not working, and then they just go through, like how you said, like you got complacent when you bounced back. It was just
yeah,
like, let's just give up. This is what I'm meant to do.
yeah.
So those are two things that goal setting is good, like on paper, but then in reality, you don't always hit it, or sometimes you don't set it right. And what are your answers to those two things? Hey there. If you want to know when the next episode drops, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell icon. Until then, keep crushing it.